We are right at 6 o'clock now, and I just am delighted to say that tonight we have with us Jackie Lewin from St. Joseph, Missouri. And thanks to Frank Tortorich, who invited Jackie to be on our program. Frank is involved with the California Immigrant Trail and the other historic trails. Jackie is in particular involved with the Pony Express National Historic Trail. And tonight we're going to hear about her work on the riders and research and exhibits that she's been working on. So thank you so much, Jackie. And if there's anything else you want to say to introduce yourself, please do.
Okay, well, I'm really pleased to be with you and like to say hello to people on the other end of the trail. I think it's going to be fun to be with you this evening. And thank you, Frank, for contacting me. And Frank is an Oregon California Trails Association friend, and I appreciate that. As Jennifer told you, I am Jackie Lewin. 5 years ago, I retired as director of the St. Joseph Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri. And since then, I've had the opportunity to serve as the guest curator at the Pony Express Museum in the development of the Hall of Riders, which is a new interactive exhibit. And if any of you would like to take a virtual tour of that, you can do that at ponyexpress.org. The St. Joseph Museum began researching and collecting information about the Pony Express soon after the museum's founding in 1927, and that information proved invaluable when the original stable in St. Joseph was restored and opened as a museum in 1960. And the St. Joseph Museum continued to collect information, in particular for an expansion to that museum in 1993. The staff traveled the trail, stopping at sites, libraries, talking to people who lived along the trail, and occasionally being lucky enough to talk to descendants of the riders. It was just a super fun job. After spending so much time reading the diaries and journals and letters and newspaper accounts from the 1860s and following the path of the Pony Express riders, I came to feel that I knew them. And so tonight I would like to introduce you to just a few of those riders. Now I'm going to change that screen. There are 235 men known to be riders. And I say known because no company records were kept or survived, so the names have been collected from census records, diaries, news accounts, eyewitness accounts, obituaries, etc. And in fact, 4 riders have been confirmed in the last 2 years. Some of the riders on the list may have ridden the whole 18 months, and some may have ridden just one time. We found that they came from 8 foreign countries and 33 states. The Pony Express, just a little bit of background here. The Pony Express lasted from April 3rd, 1860 to mid-November 1861, and the trail ran from St. Joseph to Sacramento, nearly 2,000 miles. But many people don't want to think that the Pony Express was actually following a route that was already pretty well established. In 1844, the first people left from St. Joseph going west, and people were going to California, Oregon, Salt Lake City. So it was a path that had been developed. Here we have the route of the trail. It ran through Kansas territory, Nebraska territory, Utah territory to the state of California. Today that's the Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, and California. Fort Kearny and Fort Laramie had been established in the 1840s to protect immigrants, and Fort Bridger and Salt Lake City were also settled in the 1840s, and Sacramento. So these are some of the sites that the riders would have passed through. Now, in order to manage this 2,000-mile route, the trail was divided into divisions. From St. Joseph to Fort Kearny to Horseshoe Station to Salt Lake City to Roberts Creek to Sacramento. So today, or tonight, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about what each section might have been like and who a few of the riders were in each one of those sections. So Division 1, which ran from St. Joseph to Fort Kearny, was overseen by a man named A.E. Lewis. His responsibility, as well as the other division superintendents, included setting up and maintaining stations, providing stock and supplies, and hiring riders. The trail left the thriving town of St. Joseph, crossed the Missouri River by ferry, wound through the towns and farms of Kansas, and entered the lower plains of Nebraska Territory. This is an 1861 drawing of St. Joseph, what the rider would have seen as he left on his ride. This is a side of the trail as it headed into present-day Seneca, Kansas. And these ruts were made by wagons heading into Goddard Station, which a relay station in Kansas. The Pony Express was following an established route. This shows the Marysville home station today. Both Seneca and Marysville served as home stations, and then other places along the trail, home stations were moved occasionally also. Riders usually rode 75 to 100 miles, stopping at a home station and waiting for the mochila, or the mail bag. Now, the mail bag is the only thing that traveled the entire distance of the trail. Horses were changed about every 7 to 10 miles, and it took usually about an hour to go from one relay station to another. This is Cottonwood or Hollenberg Station. It's the last station in Kansas, and it is significant because it is the only station still standing on its original site and appearing as it did at the time of the Pony Express. This is Rock Creek Station as it appeared today in southeastern Nebraska. And some of the riders who rode in Division 1. Johnny Fry. Johnny Fry moved to Missouri with his family from Kentucky and settled in a farm along the Missouri River just south of St. Joseph in the river bottomland. He became well known in the area for his skill as a rider, and he often raced in many contests. On April 3rd, 1860, Johnny Fry rode into history when he carried the first mail out of St. Joseph. And then 10 days later, he brought the first mail from California back to St. Joseph amid all kinds of celebrations in town. He rode from April 1860 to May 1861, and then he left the Pony Express. During the Civil War, he was a civilian scout and messenger for the Union. On October 6, 1863, he was killed at Baxter Springs, Kansas, when Quantrell's guerrillas made a surprise attack on an encamped Union men. Fry was only 21 years old. I had the opportunity to meet Mary Fry, who is Johnny's great-great-niece, when she visited the museum. She's shown here holding a ladle, which is a prized possession of the family. It's a ladle that Johnny Fry had given to her mother. Jack Keatley moved to the United States from England with his family and was in St. Joseph and actually saw Johnny Fry leave on that first ride. He later became a rider, and he rode from Seneca to Big Sandy. One of the significant things that he did was that he took another rider's turn one time. He rode from Big Sandy to St. Joseph and then back west to Seneca, which was a total distance of 340 miles, made in 31 hours. He didn't stop, but when he finally finished his ride in Seneca, it's reported that they took him from the saddle sound asleep. This is a picture of how he looked in later life. This is Charles Cliff. He came from St. Louis. He and his older brother, Gus, were both riders. They started in May 1861 when Johnny Fry stopped. They rode from St. Joseph to Seneca, that first route. Their route went through the Kickapoo Indian Reservation. Now, after riding for the Pony Express, Cliff went to New Mexico and drove ox teams, but later returned to St. Joseph, where he worked in the feed and flour business. He was a well-known figure in St. Joseph. He died in 1924, and this is a picture taken of him just before he passed away. He is the one on the left, and this is the 1923 Pioneer Celebration in St. Joseph. And the building over here on the right, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but that is actually the Pony Express stable, which is the museum today. This is Thomas Thornhill Wilson, and he is a fairly recent find as a Pony Express rider. He immigrated from to New York from England when he was 19 years old. And 2 years later, he was in Illinois and then decided he wanted to keep moving west and came to Kansas. And while in Kansas, was hired to be a Pony Express rider. His obituary says he drove the first Pony Express from Atchison to Seneca. So you notice it says Atchison to Seneca. During the Civil War, which started in 1861, St. Joseph became known for its numerous Southern sympathizers. And as a result, for the last 2 months of its operation, the eastern terminus of the Pony Express was moved from St. Joseph to Atchison, which was really a staunch Union town, and they felt that it would be safer. He is the only rider that we have identified as having ridden that section from Atchison to Seneca. Division 2 went between Fort Kearny and Horseshoe in today's Wyoming. It was overseen by a man named Joseph Slade, and this is what Mark Twain, who rode a stagecoach through that area, said about Slade. A high and efficient servant of the overland, an outlaw among outlaws, and yet their relentless scourge. Slade was at once the most bloody, the most dangerous, and the most valuable citizen that inhabited the savage fastness of the mountains. Well, Slade doesn't really seem to fit the high moral standard exemplified by one of the Pony Express founders, Alexander Majors. Well, the trail met the Platte River in the middle of Nebraska Territory and followed it to its junction of the South Platte, where it swung southwest down to Julesburg so that it could pick up and deliver mail to Denver. Today, you will see these monuments at the site of Julesburg. Before picking up the Platte again, the Pony Express route went through several scenic wonders, such as Courthouse Rock, Chimney Rock, Scotts Bluff. The trail scenery had changed dramatically since St. Joseph. William Cates was one of the riders in this division. He left Illinois, went west during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, and in 1860 he was hired as a Pony Express rider. He rode from Cottonwood Springs through sand and windswept hills of today's Wyoming. He recalled, "I was a young fellow, craving excitement, and when I had a chance to ride Pony Express, I leaped on it. He's one of the riders that carried Lincoln's inaugural address, which was done in record time, 7 days and 17 hours between the telegraph ends, which were at that time were at Fort Kearny and Folsom, California. He said, "I remember when the superintendent rushed out where I was standing by my horse ready for the start. He was white with excitement. 'Ride as fast as you can, young man,' he said as he locked the pouch, because President Lincoln's inaugural message is in here." Richard Cleve. He was one of the first riders to be hired, and he actually rode for the whole time of the Pony Express. His usual route was along the Platte River from Fort Kearny to Cottonwood Springs. During the winter of 1861, he started his run in a raging blizzard. He recalled, "I got about 7 miles from the last station and found it impossible to find the road. I would get off the horse and look for the road. I would find it and mount the horse, but in 5 yards I would lose it. I tried it several times but gave up. So I dismounted and led the horse back and forth until daylight. It seemed like a long while, but at last daylight came. It was a terrible night. I got to the station about 9 o'clock, hungry as a wolf, 40 below." This is Patrick McEnany. He was born in Ireland and immigrated to the United States, to New York in 1854, and he enlisted in Troop K of the 2nd U.S. Dragoons. And if you look at that, the military that was stationed in Fort Laramie, where he was, a number of the men were Irish. From April to August 1860, he was employed as a Pony Express rider. His route went from Fremont to Julesburg. In reminiscence, this is what he said. "We got to a high bluff, and all of the scared mortals, it was me. Here I was in a cyclone coming off to the right." And in his reminiscence, he spells that S-I-C-L-O-O-N. "The pony knew what was coming, so I gave him the head, and away he galloped to the left for about a mile. When McEnany got back to the trail, he found that there was hail as large as teacups, and that cyclone took a cottonwood tree about 3 feet from the ground and snipped it off like breaking a match and took it clean across the Platte River." Well, during the Civil War, he was chief scout for General Grant, and later in life, which the picture on the right shows, he lived in Washington, D.C., where he worked in the U.S. Pension Office. This is William Tuff, who came from Georgia. Here we have a picture of Tuff. William Tuff's on the left, and his brother Littleton Tuff is on the right. Both of those men rode for the Pony Express. He was hired William Tuff was first hired as a driver for supply wagons to military posts, but then was hired to ride for the Pony Express in Nebraska. According to one story, he was about 2 days overdue during a blizzard, and another rider went to find him. Tuff was found nearly frozen to death and taken to Mud Spring Station. His feet were so badly frozen that it was feared that he wouldn't walk again, but he did recover, and he joined the Union during the Civil War. He became the chief of scouts for the Union in Kansas, and on October 6, 1863, he too was at the Baxter Springs, Kansas area when the Union forces were attacked by Quantrell's guerrillas. He actually wrote of seeing Johnny Fry, the first rider, being killed in that battle. In later life, Tuff was U.S. Marshal of Kansas and operated the largest horse and mule market in the Kansas City stockyards. So Division 3 ran between Horseshoe Station and Salt Lake City and was overseen by James Bromley. Most of the young men who rode in this area were Mormons. Around Horseshoe Station, the terrain was high plains. The well-known landmarks in this area included Independence Rock, where thousands of immigrants climbed to the top and etched their names in stone. The trail followed the Sweetwater, which ran through Devil's Gate. The trail actually didn't go through the gate, but it went around the gate to a station on the west side. The trail crossed the Continental Divide at South Pass, which was a wide saddle of land, not the switchbacks that we usually associate with the Continental Divide. The land was very arid and desolate, leading to the station at Church Buttes. After Church Buttes, the trail descended into Echo Canyon. Today's I-80 follows the trail through Echo Canyon. After Echo Canyon, the trail began to climb over the Wasatch Mountains and then headed down into Salt Lake City through Immigration Canyon. Salt Lake City of today just could not have been imagined by the riders. Some of the riders who rode in this division, Charles Becker, he was born in Pennsylvania, moved to Fort Leavenworth in his late teens, and actually worked as a freighter for Russell, Majors, and Waddell. In 1860 May, he became a Pony Express rider, and his route was from Plants Station on the Sweetwater River to Rocky Ridge, along the North Platte from Deer Creek to Red Buttes. His greatest danger came from small bands of renegade Indians. One time he talked about them stealing his horse, but being able to save the mochila and ride and carry it on to the next station. His proudest moment as a rider was carrying the announcement of Lincoln's election. For this particular run, he says that extra stations were set up to get fresh horses. Instead of being about 10 miles apart, they put the stations 5 to 6 miles so they could travel a little faster. Between relays, Becker liked to read and study nature. He said, "Solitude, whether from choice or necessity, has never meant loneliness, but continuous opportunity for study. Why a man who loves books and nature has a dog can never be lonely. Why there are ants to study, if nothing else." After the Pony Express, Becker traded in California, mined in Idaho, and finally settled in eastern Oregon. By 1894, he owned the Becker Ranch, consisting of 3,500 acres, and was one of the cattle kings of eastern Oregon. He died at age 91. Now, William Frederick Cody came from Iowa, and as a child, he moved with his family to Kansas Territory, where he spent a great deal of time with the Kickapoo Indians. He was 15 when he was hired by the Pony Express. One of the sections he rode was Red Buttes, shown in the picture, to 3 crossings. A very treacherous part of the trail in present-day Wyoming. His longest ride that he reported was 320 miles at an average of 15 miles an hour. Now that's pretty fast for a Pony Express horse. Usually they ran about 10. Cody gained the name Buffalo Bill when he was hired by the Kansas Pacific Railroad to shoot bison for the railroad construction crews. In later years, he operated the Wild West Show, which featured Indian stagecoaches, cowboys, and bison in an open-air production kind of similar to a circus. He was in St. Joseph in 1913 for a ceremony at the DAR monument across from the Pony Express stables. Now, this particular picture is interesting because it's not only Cody on the horse, but the 2 men on the side are also Pony Express riders who were living in St. Joseph in 1930. Charlie Cliff with his hand on the monument, and Charlie Thompson, another writer who is standing right next to him. Now, some historians dispute the fact that Cody even rode for the Pony Express. However, Alexander Majors, who was known to be truthful, God-fearing man, wrote that Cody rode. The doubting historians say that Majors said this because Cody was financially helping an aging Majors who had fallen on hard times. But Cody did more to publicize the Pony Express than anyone else throughout the whole world through the travels of his Wild West show. So moving on west, we have Salt Lake City to Roberts Creek, which is Division 4. This is Howard Egan, who was the superintendent of that section, and he also rode at times, making him the oldest rider in his 40s. Major Egan was one of the Mormon church leaders who took turns guarding Brigham Young's grave to prevent desecration. Several miles after leaving Salt Lake City, the trail passed through a military establishment called Camp Floyd. This is Carson's Inn, which was used as a station. Today it's a state park. After Camp Floyd, the trail entered a desolate region. It traveled along the south side of the Salt Lake Desert. Stations in this area included Simpson Springs, Dugway, which gave its name to the military's Dugway Proving Grounds, and Black Rock. Deep Creek was a station on today's border between Utah and Nebraska, and this is what it looked like when we visited. Here's Ruby Valley Station. Ruby Valley Station was south of Ruby Mountains and present-day Elko, Nevada, and this building was taken down and reconstructed in the museum in Elko. Now this one, I just love this picture. He looks like a typical Pony Express rider. This is Richard Erastus Egan. He was called Rast. Born in Salem, Massachusetts, he immigrated to Nauvoo, Illinois, with his parents when they converted to Mormonism. In 1848, the family moved to Utah. As a Pony Express rider, Rast Egan carried the first westbound mochila out of Salt Lake City to Rush Valley through an arid, desolate landscape. In 1861, he married Minnie Fisher, who was a sister of another Pony Express rider, two Pony Express riders, in fact, Billy and Johnny Fisher. In later life, he was sent on a mission to England by the Mormon Church, and upon returning, he farmed for a while in Ruby Valley and was a bishop of the Mormon Church. This is Henry Jacob Faust. He was called Doc Faust. It came from Germany, and he was only 5 years old when his family came to St. Joseph, Missouri. And while he was in St. Joseph, he apprenticed for a saddle maker and then decided he liked medicine, so he apprenticed with a doctor. So that's why he's called Doc Faust. He was hoping to make a fortune, so he joined a wagon train bound for California. And on his way back to Missouri, he stopped to winter in Salt Lake City and got a job carrying mail for Brigham Young. Later, he was a station keeper and an occasional rider from Faust Station to Rush Valley. In an 1892 reminiscence, this is how Faust described his station. We built a log cabin. The roof was dirt. A wagon cover made a carpet. The window was glazed with a flour sack. The door was a blanket. The table and end gate of a wagon. The first stage west of Salt Lake City brought Mrs. Faust to this stately mansion where she lived 9 months without ever seeing another woman. He spoke also of seeing thunderstorms in his area, and how terrible they were. And this is a monument that you see if you travel that section of the trail by South Station. Now this is kind of an unusual picture. This is a picture of 3 Pony Express riders all together. Over here on the left we have Billy Fisher. In the center is Michael Whalen, and on the right is Johnny Fisher. All 3 Pony Express riders in that division, and it's kind of special to have a picture like that. Now this is William Frederick Fisher. I also like this picture because he looks like a kind of a dress like a Pony Express rider would be. He was born in Kent County, England, and in April 1860 he was hired along with his brother to ride for the Pony Express, and he rode from Ruby Valley to Egan Station. He carried the first eastbound mail in the mochila. Billy Fisher is kind of an interesting figure. He left a lot of letters telling about what it was like to be a rider, and in one of those he talks about passing letters and notes to his brother John when they would meet on the trail, and John would carry these letters back into Salt Lake City. They were actually love letters to Millennium Andress, Billy's sweetheart. They got married in January 1861, and it sounds like a really romantic story until one finds out that Billy added another wife later on. After the Pony Express, he worked as on the construction crew for the Union Pacific, and it seems like a lot of the riders in that area, when they were through riding, did work for the Union Pacific. He became a Mormon bishop, served as the secretary of the Idaho Territorial Convention, and was admitted to the bar as an attorney. Now, the spirit of adventure didn't diminish in the Fisher family. Pony Express rider Billy Fisher's great-grandson, also Dr. William Frederick Fisher, was mission specialist on the 1985 flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery. We had the honor of hosting the astronaut in St. Joseph just prior to the opening of the renovated stables in 1993. This is George Scoble, who was born in Massachusetts. He is really another fairly recent writer that hadn't shown up on any other list of historians. He came to Nebraska from Massachusetts. He lost his land to claim jumpers, decided to continue on west, and got a job driving cattle along the trail to California. At 20, he was hired as a stagecoach driver, and then in late February 1860, he was hired to ride for the Pony Express in today's Nevada. On the way to the home station at Robbers Creek, he heard noises of things going on, and it kind of scared him, and this is what he said. That first night was an awful lonesome ride. He was actually carrying the first eastbound mail when he said this. That first night was an awful lonesome ride. I shall never forget it. Before midnight of that initial ride, I imagined that I could see Indians beside the trail in hiding. More than I believe now were even in the country. I could see them peeping at me from behind the rocks and the trees. Well, later he went back to Wakefield, Massachusetts. His family continued to live there, and this is an area where he rode. And then a number of years ago, a man came into the Pony Express Museum, Dwight Ritter, who is also from Massachusetts, from Cape Cod, and he had a diary with him that his ancestor, George Scoble, had written, and it told all about being a Pony Express rider. This is George Washington Thatcher. His family crossed the plains to Utah in 1847 with the first migration of the Mormon pioneers. In 1860, he was hired as a Pony Express rider for the section from Salt Lake City to Camp Floyd. He recalled being attacked by a wolverine in that area and told about having to roll up into a ball and using his feet to kick it away, and then had to run to catch his horse before the wolverine caught back up with him again. During his time that he rode for the Pony Express, he married Eunice Young, the daughter of Mormon leader Brigham Young. And then in March 1867, he took a second wife, Fanny Young, who was Eunice's half-sister. And this is the Beehive House in Salt Lake City where his wives were probably raised. It was where Brigham Young lived with his wives and children. He became head of the Thatcher Brothers and Company Bank and served as president until his death. And he also went on a church mission to England and became board president of the new Brigham Young College in Logan. He was the mayor of Logan and a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1900. Well, here we have Elijah Nicholas Wilson. Sometimes he's called Uncle Nick because he wrote a book called Uncle Nick Among the Shoshone, which was really popular in the even in the 1950s. I've heard of people reading that in school, but it tells the life of his adventure. He spent a number of years living with the Shoshone chief Washakie, and in fall of 1860, he was hired to ride for the Pony Express. He later recalled, "The distance was about 75 miles and was a very hard ride for the horse as well as for me, because much of the distance was through deep sand. Some things were not so bad, however, for I had no mountains to cross. The weather in winter was mild, and the Indians were a little more friendly here." Now, because he preferred to kind of live on the frontier, where there were few people, he moved to Jackson Hole area, and then in 1889 pioneered the town of Wilson, Wyoming. Okay, our last division, Division 5, ran from Roberts Creek to Salt Lake to Sacramento and was overseen by Bolivar Roberts. The eastern part of this division was a typical Great Basin terrain, arid. Stations in this area included Sand Springs, Fort Churchill, and as they approached the Sierra Mountain, Carson City, all in today's western Nevada. Riders going west generally approached the Sierra when the trail rose to pass Bigler Lake, or today's Lake Tahoe, and crossed the mountains down into Sacramento. Now, several of the buildings that house stations or on the location of the stations on the western slope are still in use today as motels, restaurants, gas stations, or grocery stores. Here we have Yanks, Strawberry, Sportsman's Hall, and Placerville. And the trail soon picked up the American River and followed it towards Sacramento. The trail also passed Sutter's Fort, about 2 miles from the Sacramento terminus. Many people gathered at Sutter's Fort to meet the first rider and accompany him into the terminus. Today, a statue marks the end of the trail. And the offices of the Pony Express in Sacramento are still standing now as then, about a block from the Sacramento River. The mail destined for San Francisco was loaded onto a steamboat and headed down the river into San Francisco Bay and across the bay to San Francisco. On a few occasions, the mail was carried by horseback from Sacramento to San Francisco. The riders in this division, one of them was Bronco Charlie Miller. He was born in Hat Creek, Modoc County, California. So I don't know, some of you that live in California may know about where that is. He was born in a covered wagon when his parents were traveling to settle. He claimed that he was in Sacramento with his father when he was only 11 years old, which would make him the youngest rider. And it was time for the mail to leave, but there wasn't any rider. So his father lifted him onto the horse and said, "He knows the trail. Ride like hell, son." And after that return to Sacramento, Miller was hired as a rider between Placerville and Carson City. His name does not appear on any early list. However, he wrote in his diary that he did ride for the Pony Express. After the Pony Express, Miller was a Bronco buster and earned the name of Bronco Charlie. He served as a Texas Ranger and a scout for the Army, and around 1900 he toured with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. At age 81, he rode a horse over 4,000 miles from New York to San Francisco, carrying a letter from the mayor of New York to the mayor of San Francisco. He owned a little restaurant in New York, in Oakdale, New York, which was kind of close to an artist colony on Long Island, and he died in New York in 1955 at 105 years old. He was the last surviving Pony Express rider. William Streeper, born in Philadelphia, joined the Mormon Church and moved to Nauvoo. After an anti-Mormon mob chased them from their Nauvoo home, they fled down to St. Louis, where they lived so they could make enough money to immigrate to Utah, and they reached Salt Lake Valley in 1851. When the Pony Express started, he was carrying local mail, but was soon hired to ride for the Pony Express. He recalled that Alexander Majors, one of the bosses of the line, used to give them a Bible to keep them from swearing. He said, "Majors told us that the Bible would keep us from swearing because when we wanted to swear, we would think of the book in our pocket and the cuss words would be kept back." Well, California rider Bronco Charlie Miller wrote about talking with Buffalo Bill and other Pony Express riders in the Wild West show, and he said, "We'd all get serious and we'd think back to them long gone days, and I reckon our backs would straighten a bit and our chins would come up and we would remember the path of the Pony Express. We'd think of the boys that rode with us on that trail long ago." Well, my friend and co-worker Marilyn and I took a number of trips along the trail, and you can see that our method of transportation was much more comfortable and faster. And we did have many opportunities to stop and listen to the quietness and contemplate what the land looked like to the riders and imagine them coming into view. And on one occasion in western Utah, we were surprised. We actually saw the riders, modern day National Pony Express Association riders. So that concludes my presentation to you. I hope that it wasn't too long. But Jennifer, did you want to do questions now or how?
Can't hear you, Jennifer.
Should I? Oh, I am so sorry. No, thank you so much. I think most people, I had myself on mute also. But anyway, thank you. That was just so great to really get a whole sense of the whole trail and all the divisions and some of the amazing people. I just want to open it up if anybody else wants to. I have plenty of questions, but I want to see if anybody else wants to start it off for us. Looks like Frank has one. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, Jackie, many, many years ago, you were researching the advertisement, the original advertisement, and it was in question. And you asked me to do some research for you. out here on the West Coast. Did you ever resolve that? And could you tell people what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there is an advertisement that is called, it says, wanted young, skinny, wiry fellows, not over 18, willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred. I think it's something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
We did look for where that came from, and at one time we had that on exhibit at the museum, but since then it has been taken off and replaced with one that we found in a newspaper. The earliest place that that particular ad can be found is in a 1923 Sunset magazine article. And, you know, maybe it was made up just for that article, but it can't be traced any farther back than that. So I would say that's part of the lore of the Pony Express, folklore.
Yeah, I went to the State Library, I went to UOP, I went to Davis, Sacramento State, everywhere I could think of, did all the newspapers, and nothing resembled that that advertising.
Yeah, it, you know, it was made into a lot of little posters that were sold at museums along the trail, and almost has made its way into part of the history, I think, even though it can't be proven to be true.
One other question.
go ahead, Frank.
And then I'll be quiet. Jackie, could you tell me from a percentage of speed that a horse would average as they were riding from, you know, stop to full blast?
Well, yeah, generally, what I have heard is that, and if you kind of figure out the time-wise of how long it took them to ride from home station to home station, it looked like they were riding about 10 miles an hour. And they didn't like to do a full-out run with the horses because that was kind of hard on them, and they were wanting to take care of the horses. But it looks like that on occasions, if they had some special thing that they were carrying, that they might have gone a little faster and maybe tried to put some of the relay stations a little closer together. Most generally, it was about 10 miles an hour.
And would you consider that a run or a fast trot, or?
I think that would be kind of a fast trot.
Okay. Because that's what I've always said. They went at a fast trot. Okay, I'm done.
Right.
Oh, no, this is kind of related to that, Frank, because you know, just getting the sense of, you know, how many days each of these, the relays were taking. So, I mean, was every division and every section, you know, being ridden every day? Was this, you know, like we have the Postal Service today, 7 days, or well, 6 days a week at least, that people were actually in some stage of delivering mail? And I was just wondering if it was year round every day, or how that kind of worked. And also, you know, if this mail was open to all citizens, you know, this service, or was it really just a business service? Obviously, you mentioned love letters, so it was personal as well as business.
Okay, let's see, your first question about how often they left. At first, the Pony Express left once a week, and then it was changed to twice a week. And, you know, I've always thought it would, and I never have done this, if you were leaving twice a week from each side, you know, you'd have riders out on the trail all the time, going both directions, and it would take 10 days to travel the whole trail. I've always kind of wanted to figure out mathematically how many riders would be out on the trail at a time. But if that kind of answer your question, I don't know for sure, but I know they were leaving twice a week, and they were traveling both directions, and that it took 10 days. So let's see.
Well, you would kind of think,
yeah,
think of the, you know, there was all these delivery places, it seems, or not. Maybe, I mean, the places that people actually received mail, were they, throughout the whole path, or they really only just received mail in Sacramento and St. Joseph?
Well, mail could be taken out at like Fort Kearny and Fort Laramie. Some mail went down to Denver, but most of the mail was carried, well, actually most of the mail was carried to the east from California. But I'm not sure what I'm getting to the question here. You asked something about the kinds of mail that were carried. It cost $5 to send a letter of what we would send today. And so most of the people who were mailing things, it had to be pretty important. There were a lot of business letters that were sent, some government information, newspapers, newspaper correspondents sent information back. You would get information from the Orient came into California, and it would be carried to the east. And the transatlantic cable was finished, so mail information from Europe was actually being carried across the Pony Express from the eastern terminus. So it wasn't just a lot of personal letters.
Right. But then, so this was the Pony Express was, St. Joseph, Missouri, then, out to California. But so did they have some other kind of mail system for St. Joseph to the East Coast?
Oh, okay, yeah. Once a letter reached St. Joseph, it was, if they wanted it to be sent by telegraph, then the letter would be opened and the information telegraphed on to the east, or it would be put a regular postage on it and it would be sent by regular mail on to the east.
And that was by train?
Yeah, the Hannibal St. Joseph Railroad came to St. Joseph, so it would probably be carried out by that.
I'll let other people ask questions. It's just such an amazing story. Thank you so much. I know there's other questions out there, and I see Ruth, go ahead.
Okay, so $5 in 1861 is how much it cost? Because I just looked it up on the computer. That would be
$5 per half ounce. Yeah.
Okay, because
So
in today's money, hello? In today's money, that's $156.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent in today's. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it would be a really. Can you imagine mailing a letter for $156? It's just that, yeah, you'd really have to want to send that pretty badly. But they, you can see why.
Thank you.
I'll come back if nobody else has a question. Jackie, I understand from my research and your research that it was actually costing around $16 a letter. And so it was a loser from the beginning. Am I right?
You mean the entire Pony Express venture? Okay. Yeah, it was. And, when Russell, Majors, and Waddell started that, they knew that it was only going to be temporary, and they knew that they probably wouldn't make a lot of money from it, but they were taking a gamble that they would draw attention to the viability of the route that they had control of, the central route, as compared to the southern route, where the government mail contract actually was at that time. And they were hoping that they could get the government mail contract moved up to the central route and that they could have that. And so they knew that the telegraph was going to be finished. So this was just kind of an advertising gimmick, I guess, for their route, because they wanted to actually carry letter mail and freighting things for the government along the central route.
So Jackie, now that's amazing. Now that makes us curious about what the southern route was. But also, since you've brought up this business aspect and, you know, what we know to have happened, some kind of a bankruptcy that then enters Wells Fargo, I wonder if there's anything else you can say about Wells Fargo's role in this, because we understand that is part of Placerville's history.
Mm-hmm. Well, when the southern route for that had the mail contract was the Butterfield route, and I think that is one of the routes that's being considered for a national trail status, I think, right now. And so when the mail contract was issued, it was moved up to the central route, but instead of being given to Russell, Majors, and Waddell, it was given to the operators that operated it on the southern route to move it up to the north. Now, when there was a time when Russell, Majors, and Waddell divided up that route, and they gave the western half to Wells Fargo to run. So that's where it comes in, and that's why some of the letters that were carried by Pony Express have some Wells Fargo stamps on them, because they were actually delivered to Wells Fargo sites to be sent, and then they connected to the Russell, Majors, and Waddell part of the trail coming east.
But do you know of any of the, I mean, have you seen in your research any connection about Wells Fargo's presence with the Pony Express in Placerville?
You know, I just really can't recall, except that they would be operating that section of the trail.
Right. I've found some documentation that is in the from the Library of Congress, so I think that's a good source. But I just thought I would ask. That was really neat to find out that Bronco Charlie Miller was, you said, also connected to part of our route here and from California originally. So, or not, at least originally to when he started riding. So that was neat. I know. I want to make sure. Go ahead.
Does anyone know where Hat Creek is?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I have been there.
Well, that's where he was supposed to have been born. So that would be an interesting place for me to see.
It's there's a Hat Creek district on the Lassen National Forest, so I think part of that forest is in Modoc County. But yeah, so there are definitely folks there that probably work in the cultural resources side of things that could help tell you some things about the history. Who else has questions? I bet there are some. Don't be shy. We have an expert here from St. Joseph. It's just amazing. I mean, I'll just make the comment that it was really nice as you were weaving this together, I mean, to really get a sense of, you know, how entwined this was with, you know, kind of events associated with the Civil War. You know, these people, you know, it just wove into their life. So that was really interesting to me. I did want to ask, I know that when I started looking at the online exhibit, and I'll send out the link to folks later, but just how many, it actually looked like from that exhibit that more of the riders were from the East than from the West, which I thought was interesting too.
Yes. I would say that probably most of the riders came from Pennsylvania area. One of the exhibits that we created for the Hall of Riders lists where all of the riders were born. And so you can kind of get an idea of what countries they came from, what states they came from. I think California has only one rider that was born there. So it's, you know, it was just kind of an interesting thing to kind put that exhibit together and kind of look at where they came from. But most of them did come from the East, yes.
And then it sounds like our one rider ended up dying in the East.
Yes, yes. You know, at the Pony Express Museum, we have a carving, a little child's carving of a Pony Express. It's childlike, but it was made by Bronco Charlie. He liked to do a lot of wood carvings, and children would come and watch him make these wood carvings, and we have one of those on exhibit there. But he lived right close to an artist colony, and the restaurant that he had is now on the grounds of a college on Long Island. But and we also have a placemat from that restaurant that he had, the Bronco Charlie's log cabin restaurant.
Wow.
It's just
Can you say
interesting
again?
to see what they did.
No, just because you mentioned, I know in what you were saying about Bronco Charlie, because now we're going to have to, we'll be diving into Bronco Charlie, but can you say again, he was certainly part of the route through Placerville. I know you mentioned Placerville when you said his name, but that means he was part of our section, I guess, of the trail.
Yeah, he was part of that section. Now, you know, a lot of those guys that were in the Wild West show, well, there is a book called I'm trying to think who wrote it, about Bronco Charlie, kind of an autobiography written about him that you might want to look at. But a lot of those people who were in the Wild West show tended to exaggerate and really play up the rules that they had in the Pony Express. You know, they may have remembered things to be a little different than what really happened.
All right. Well, that's a perfect tie-in to when I started working with Jackie on getting word out about her presentation. I picked a photo that you all saw in my announcement of a photo of four men that were supposedly riders, and she immediately said, I'm not so sure those are even riders. And so we said how, you know, there's definitely some folklore associated with this Pony Express story, but thank you for tying us to, you know, these original sources and you know, real families and real people and diaries and things that really happened. So I just want to thank you so much. You know, we are kind of at the top of our hour, and we're going to be needing to take a break and switch gears into another Zoom meeting at 7:30. But I just want to do one more last call if there's any burning question out there.
Jennifer?
Yes, go ahead.
Frank's been waving his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. Go ahead, Frank.
Well,
Last call for.
I want to thank Jackie for agreeing to do this. Yeah, Jackie's been a friend of mine for a long time, but the other comment I wanted to make is that there's an interesting story about how Russell Waddell and Majors acquired the mail contract for the Pony Express. And I found out this research when I was writing my book on Snowshoe Thompson. And there was kind of a man named Chorpenning had the contract from Sacramento to Salt Lake, and how Russell and Waddell and Majors picked up that section. Seems to be a little bit of underhanded negotiations going on there. It's quite an interesting story. So there's more to it on both ends of that. So thank you, Jackie, very much. Did a great job.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I've enjoyed being with you.
Great. Well, we will
great.
connect again, I'm sure. But everyone, give her a big hand,
really-
virtual or on audio. But thank you so much, Jackie. We will look forward to staying in touch with you.
You did
Thank
a
you.
fantastic job.
Thank you,
All
Jackie.
right.
Thank you.
That was just,
Thank you.
thank you, everybody.